Hey guys, and welcome back to another Warframe video. Today we're going to be revisiting our farming frames, as it's been a fairly long while since I've actually done a video on them, and a few things have changed, although not a whole lot. But people have been asking me in the comments and on Discord as well if I can show them off a bit, so we're going to run through them today. It's also that time of year when Warframe devs like to throw out a cheeky double resource weekend potentially, so yeah, that might be upcoming. Hence, I wanted to put this video out now. So yeah, we're going to do 3 frames this video. We're going to do Khora, we're going to do Nekros, and we're going to do Atlas. I'm going to leave Hydroid to one side for now because his update actually kind of threw off his farming capability a bit, in my opinion at least. So yeah, we're gonna leave him to one side and just focus on those 3. That's Khora, Nekros, and Atlas. And we're just going to run through the builds real quick, and then we'll do maybe like a 2-minute clip each of using them in action. All of these farms are going to be on Steel Path. If you don't want to do them on Steel Path, then you're going to have to get a bit of a squad together in normal star chart because your enemy spawn rates are going to be far less. In Steel Path, if you're on solo, you will still get the spawn rates of a 4-player squad no matter what. So yeah, we're going to run through the build. Let's look at Khora first. Khora revolves around her 4th ability and Pilfering Strangledome. That's obviously where we're going to get our additional loot from. And we're going to be hitting them with our Whip Claw forever. It's going to be a very repetitive farm. It's not the funnest playstyle in the game. And yeah, accumulating Whip Claw just to increase the damage on that. You can see our strength is down at 40%. The range here is about right. You do not want too short or too long range on your build, because if it's too short, enemies won't get pulled in, and if it's too long, then you won't be able to hit enemies with your Whip Claw. So anywhere between kind of 120 and 140% I found works. And then pretty high duration and efficiency is also very much needed, I would say. Ready Steel for our aura mod right here. This is totally personal preference. It is not at all necessary. If you wanted to run this build without having to put Former on, then you could just throw on Steel Charge, and then you'd be able to fit it on, I believe. And then on our arcanes here, these also aren't necessary. If you want to see this build very much dulled down, go ahead and have a look at my Warframe 2024 playthrough series, because there is a whole video where we farm up resources with our Khora, and we do not have access to arcanes, and all of our mods aren't maxed out. It is very much dulled down, so yeah, go and have a look at that. If you don't have Arcane Energize and you're struggling with energy, then I probably recommend actually swapping out Rolling Guard and maybe throwing on Prime Flow. And then as your Exodus mod, you could put on something like Preparation. That way you'd start with maxed energy, and perhaps you'd feel less of a hit as you play through the missions. But the only reason I'm using Rolling Guard is just to stay alive as I pick up the loot. So yeah, that's pretty much that. In terms of primary and secondary, we're not going to use them at all. Just throw on whatever powerful weapons you might have, and perhaps you can use them in an emergency. And then your melee weapon we're obviously not going to be using, but the mods on it do affect the damage on our whip. So yeah, right here, this is what we are going to be using. I'm not throwing an arcane on because I realize a lot of people may not have access to those still, or at least a max rank one, and I certainly don't on this account, so yeah, I've just left it blank for the sake of it. Exodia Contagion is also not going to make a whole lot of difference. It is, again, just for maybe, you know, taking out the Acolytes, but to be honest, we can do that with our whip if we need to. And yeah, Blood Rush, Weeping Wounds, that's going to increase our crit chance. This is going to increase our status chance. We want to apply as much viral as possible so that our damage basically increases exponentially as we hit the enemies. Riven mods, again, completely not necessary. See my Warframe 2024 playthrough video for that. And then crit chance and crit damage is all that really matters for the rest of this. So yeah, that's basically the build on there. The only other thing I would say you could run, Nariman, for Power Spike. This is basically going to mean that our combo counter doesn't just reset every time that the combo bar drains. It's just going to go down by 5, which is very useful for keeping our combo counter up nice and high, and hence keeping up our Blood Rush and our Weeping Wounds. You can also run a Smeetigavat, which I don't yet have on. This is going to utilize Charm, which every now and then will give us about 2.5 minutes worth of double resource drops. But again, it's going to be RNG as to how much this pops up, so do bear that in mind. Gear-wise, we're not going to be using anything. However, if you did want to use something, you could put down, say, a Vapor Spectre, such as Volt, who can then throw up a shield in front of you. That's going to basically completely prevent any damage being done to you because nothing gets through Volt's shield. And if you really wanted to as well, you could put on something like a Shield Osprey to help you keep your shields up the whole time, and obviously your Volt Spectre, then you're basically just good to go for as long as you want. And yeah, that's the Khora build. So let's take a look at it in action. I'll explain a few of the mechanics as we're going through it, but yeah, that's the first build. Alright, so the main question I get asked about Khora is kind of like where are the best spots to farm with her, and obviously in Warframe maps generate completely different every time, but kind of the key areas you want to look for are choke points where enemies are going to funnel in. One of the main things to be aware of is that obviously any enemies that are caught in Khora's Strangledome, their allies are going to shoot at. So you don't want an area with a long line of sight, because if you do that, the enemies aren't going to run towards your Strangledome, they're instead just going to stand there and shoot their teammates that are already caught in it, which we want to avoid at all costs. So basically you want to look for an area, like I said, with a chokehold, short lines of sight, and if possible, you want quite a few connecting rooms coming into it, because the enemy spawn mechanics in Warframe, although they're a bit weird, you can generally just get away with thinking of it as if there's a lot of connecting rooms to the place that you're farming, you're going to be just fine. I'm sure there's plenty of videos out there explaining the spawn mechanics in Warframe in greater detail, so I would probably recommend going and have a look at those if you want to know kind of the exact best spots to be farming in. Alright, so yeah, basically we're just going to do this. We're going to spam our first ability this whole time. As you can see with my Riven mod, this makes it very easy for us to hit red crits, which is quite nice. And when our Acolyte spawns, we're just going to use our second ability, our Ensnare, to keep him in one place. And then we can either use our Whip or our Exodia Contagion, or whatever weapon you have to hand to take him out. So there he is. We'll just use our Whip here. 2 whips and he's dead. Very nice. And yeah, you can see every time I want to roll in and grab the loot, I'm going to be invincible for a bit because of my rolling guard, and then as soon as I get out, I'm now vulnerable again. And we can pretty much do this indefinitely. You can really go for a very long time. The longest I've gone before I had to stop was about 4 hours, a very long time ago. And if you want to increase, obviously, your drops a bit more, you can do a Fisher mission, a Void Fisher mission. If you don't know, opening relics will allow you to increase your resource drop chance and also resource drops just generally. So it's a good way to increase your resource gain quite passively, provided you have enough relics. Alright guys, so moving on to Nekros. This build we're actually not going to be using Shield of Shadows, which I actually tend to do in my other build videos, but yeah, we're just going to go with an alternate tank build with our Nekros right here. I am actually using 2 health Aesir shards on here, along with some casting speed Talforged Ambers. Not necessary. You do not need those at all, particularly the Talforged Ambers. Yeah, if you wanted some more starting HP, then by all means. But we are going to be running Arcane Blessing to get ourselves a ton of health, and then everything else is basically just geared towards staying alive and also making use of our third ability, Desecrate. I also have Ensnare on here, which works pretty well, as Strength basically does nothing for this, so yeah, it's good for corralling enemies. However, if you didn't want to use Ensnare, you could use another damage ability and throw on a bit more strength if you wanted to, and then use maybe Magus Anomaly on your Operator if you wanted to corral the enemies a bit more. Grace as well, just to increase our health pool regen, but probably not actually that necessary thinking about it. And if you had Arcane Pulse or something like that, you could replace that. So we've got Quick Thinking. That's going to use our energy to stop us from dying, combined with Prime Flow, so we've got a lot of energy. Health Conversion to give us more armor, Adaptation to give us damage resistance, Rolling Guard to make us invulnerable when we need to. It's basically a very, very, very tanky build. So yeah, that's the Nekros. For your weaponry on your Nekros, you want something that is going to be slash based, preferably. So what I'm using here is the Torrid, but I'm going to go ahead and throw on Hunting Munitions on here, as when I'm using this in its beam form, it's a very, very, very high crit chance and crit multiplier indeed, so we can go ahead and apply slash that way. And yeah, the Torrid Incarnate is just generally pretty damn good anyway. We got Galvanized Aptitude on here and Galvanized Chamber, Rhyme Rounds, Malignant Force. That's going to apply basically a ton of viral effects instantly, so it should be pretty good. Primary Merciless for increased damage on kills, sniper ammo mutation so we don't run out of ammo, basically. And yeah, that's pretty much that. Secondary weapon again, follow the same trend. Any slash-based weapon, you know, the Lato is pretty damn good. I've got a mod for it as well, which isn't great, but, you know, it kind of works, I guess. And then we're going to use our Exodia Contagion in case of emergencies. This isn't the same one we used with our Khora, simply because we are going to be not building up our combo counter on this. We just want to have a big hit instantly, so we've got Gladiator Might on there just to increase our crit multiplier up to 5 times. Should be good. We should hit orange crits anyway. And then I'm going to run Unairu. I do not have Prime Sure-Footed yet on this account, so I'm going to make use of Poise just so I don't constantly fall over. If you're running Shield of Shadows, this isn't necessary because Shield of Shadows prevents knockdown. However, if you're choosing to run this build without Shield of Shadows, then I would recommend definitely going Unairu for Poise. And similarly to our Khora, you can go ahead and run a Smeatikavat if you so wish, or a Jin if you want to stay alive and are not worried about the double resource booster that the Kavats can provide. And yeah, that's basically it. So let's take a look at this one in action. So one thing you should be aware of with Nekros' Desecrate, there is only a certain amount of enemies that it can handle. So if you're killing enemies very quickly, then to be honest, you might actually be losing out on loot. So do bear that in mind as you're going around. If you're in a squad actually using 2 Nekroses, if your kill rate is high enough, can benefit you quite greatly. So yeah, we're just going to basically run around. You can see as I'm firing off here, we're either getting viral or slash procs. The Torrid probably isn't the best weapon, you know, for using for using slash procs with. There are definitely better ones out there which will apply more. The reason we use slash procs is just so that the enemies will split into segments and will increase the amount of drops that we get if they die from a slash proc, which is quite nice. And yeah, again, this can be carried pretty damn far, and if you have a Riven mod for the Torrid, it can be carried even further. Okay guys, so our Atlas build I haven't used in so long that I've had to come onto my original account, which is so out of date now it's unreal. We're only Legendary 1, we have no Archon shards, it's terrible. I don't even have Ensnare on the helmet, so yeah, we're gonna have to make do with this. But basically, Atlas farming revolves around using his third ability, Petrify, along with Orgaze. Orgaze is actually one of the few resource farming abilities that will scale with ability strength, hence we've got a ton right here. If you wanted to use Ensnare on this build, then go ahead and throw it on your 4th probably, or maybe even your 3rd, that could work too. But basically, we are just going to be using Petrify, and we're going to be using Landslide. Even my Arcane Energize is only rank 3, how's that happen? So yeah. We're going to use, you can either use Ensnare to pull enemies in, or you can use Magus Anomaly, which we're going to use here because obviously we don't have Ensnare. And we're going to pull enemies in towards us. We're then going to use Petrify to petrify them all, and then we'll punch them with our first ability, and Orgaze will, yeah, improve the drop rates, basically. Weaponry does not matter. I believe your weapons can help a bit in terms of what mods you have on them. This is my very old Zor. So this is what we'll roll with for this, I guess. I'm not really sure. Yeah, it'll be fine. Naraman, probably necessary. And then on our companion right here, we are running our Smeatikavat again, just for the increased chance of, yeah, getting a double resource booster. So yeah, let's jump into it. Alright guys, so for Atlas farming, we're just going to spam our transference a bit to put enemies in. Might get a bit crowded, and then we'll come out, use our third ability, petrify them, and then just use our fists to just punch them all to oblivion. And that's basically all we're going to do. Just keep doing that over and over again. It can be quite repetitive and RSI inducing since we're spamming 5 so much, but it can be a nice alternative. And you can obviously just go around and use Atlas normally if you want to, and just play with a bit more roaming capability if you so choose. But yeah, if you really want to get the full effect out of Orgaze, then just pull all the enemies in, back out a bit, run out of energy, that's a classic. See, getting very, very crowded. There we go. And then, yeah, just punch them all, beat them all up. And there you go. So that's kind of the last and final way that I wanted to show how well, this is a very long time ago that I used to farm like this. It's probably nowhere near as good as it is, or it was, but it does work to some degree. So yeah, let's do a bit of a recap and round out in the Orbiter. Alright, so a bit more of a casual look at my builds this video, but hopefully it gave you a good idea of what I like to use when I farm. Generally speaking, I always go with Khora, with a few exceptions where I would run Nekros. I actually tend to use Nekros for farming the Murmur, because they're basically impossible to farm with Khora because of their pathing. It's just insanely stupid. So yeah, Nekros for Murmur, but pretty much Khora for every other faction. If you do want to see my previous farming guides, like my locations for each kind of resource, then I will leave a link to that down in the description. And I'll also leave a link to my current playthrough as well, where there's probably an episode in there. In fact, there is an episode in there where we do a few long farming runs. So yeah, go ahead and check those out. Otherwise, guys, if you did enjoy this video, please leave a like and subscribe, and I will catch you in the next one.